I'm very strange today.
All right.
All right.
I,
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's RD to RD live show. My name is Megan Boitano, and this is a topic near and dear to my heart, accepting about insurance for nutrition services. So Mandy Enright and I met, I'm not sure if we met online first or at Today's Dietitian, but we've been in contact over the last couple of years, and she is an expert of sorts. I know it may be a little uncomfortable for me to throw that term expert out there, but in the realm of reimbursement for our services through insurance. At one point, even serving as a, what's the title for the nutrition?
Reimbursement Rep.
Reimbursement Rep for the Nutrition Entrepreneurs Practice Group. So if you don't know, if you're not a member of the Nutrition Entrepreneurs Practice Group of the Academy, each state has a person who volunteers to be an expert in insurance for each state. So you have access to that. So it's another big plug for, Academy memberships are coming up for renewal. So it's definitely a great practice group. If you're not already a member, you should definitely think about it.
Yeah.
So kind of a little bit of background for today. So I, as usual, have prepared a lovely question list for me to grill Mandy on, but that the live show is not just about me, it's about all of you who are tuning in as well. So if you've got a burning question, we want you to get it answered. So go ahead and drop your question in now. I'm going to review those throughout the show. If it's something I know we're going to cover, I'll just make mention of that. And I want to make sure that you get what you tuned in to get answered here today. So without further ado, Mandy, why don't you, I know you're a second career dietitian, so tell us about your journey as a dietitian and a little bit about you.
Sure. So as you alluded to, I am a second career dietitian. I spent about the first 10 years of my professional life as an advertising executive in Manhattan. So that is really where my my background and training really comes from, is in that realm. And I decided while I was working in advertising, I specialized a lot in pharmaceutical marketing, and I had an opportunity to learn a lot about healthcare industry, and always thought nutrition was very interesting, but I never really thought of it as a career for me because science always scared me deathly. And, over time, while I was working in advertising, I started getting really involved into fitness. I got trained as a kickboxing instructor and started to teach kickboxing classes on the side. And that was kind of really what sparked my interest in this whole health and wellness field. And I was really, really hesitant to leave a career behind that I liked and was very comfortable in and was good at. But at the end of the day, you have to be happy with what you're doing. And not only was I not happy, but everybody around me knew how not happy I was. So that's usually a sign that something's not right. And because I had an opportunity to meet and encounter different healthcare fields and professionals, and we were doing a project and we had a dietitian involved, I was like, oh, that's like really interesting. That sounds kind of cool. So I looked into it and I put it off for about a year because I'm like, no, this sounds scary and terrible and scary science classes. I can't do this. And then through a series of events, life tends to guide you into ways where you didn't think you were going to go or never knew, but I had an opportunity to reset my life and career, and I decided to take it. So I went back to school, decided to become a dietitian, went the long route and did a whole combined undergraduate, what they called like a DPG certificate program and a master's program at the same time, because when I went back to school, I was about 30, and I was like, I'm not going back to school at 30 to get a second bachelor's degree. At least let's come out with something advanced at that point. So then I got my master's degree, and like most second career dietitians, I knew that the clinical realm wasn't necessarily going to be my ending ground.
And your advertising background. So I'm curious, did you always know you wanted to be a business owner? How did that happen?
No, I never did. I remember when my two favorite bosses and mentors, they left to start their own company, and I thought they were crazy. was like, what do you mean you're leaving this like cushy career behind and benefits and all that, and you're going to start this? And they're like, yeah, it's kind of scary, but like, we're excited and it's, we're ready to do something different. And I thought they were like super crazy. And then here we are. I knew I wanted to do private practice. I guess I never really considered private practice to be like entrepreneurial. I just thought like, it's like a doctor. Like, I don't necessarily think of doctors as entrepreneurs. I just think of them as like doing what they're doing. But I think over a series of time, and as you get more into this career and you meet more people and you learn about what they do and where you can take this. And that was really one of the biggest reasons I wanted to go into this nutrition world, was because of all the avenues I could go with it, because that was something I felt so stuck with advertising. It's like, I couldn't really do much other than work at an agency or work at the client. So the fact that I could do so much with it was amazing. Having an advertising background has definitely been incredibly beneficial. I didn't even know what a great asset that was going to be for me, between just knowing advertising and marketing skills, as well as just professional skills, presentation skills, and project management, time management, organization, delegation, like all these things that you don't really think about, that I guess a lot of folks aren't getting in like a traditional clinical setting. That has really allotted me. So I have a lot of love and respect for my fellow second career dietitians, because I think we tend to underestimate, undervalue even sometimes some of these skills that we come to the table with.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. Well, I definitely have, I'd love to have your advertising background. I can certainly say that. So I see we've had some questions come in, and I love that the first one is how to get started. And I feel like that's really scary. I feel like that's the stuck part. It feels like Mount Everest, right? So maybe before we'll start there. We're going to start kind of, we're not going to overwhelm with too much nitty gritty, kind of start at that. How do I get started? And then maybe we'll get a little bit more granular, and maybe segue that by talking about how did you get started? How did you start to develop this expertise?
I always think it's funny. I'm still like laughing every time you say expert, because I'm like, I don't really know if I'm an expert. I just have done it. So I had no intention of ever accepting insurance. When I was in school, I would meet with a lot of local dietitians in my area because I was really curious to learn about their private practices. And I met with a few who did participate in insurance, and they're like, oh my God, if you get the opportunity, don't accept insurance. Like, do whatever you can to not accept insurance. So when I was starting out, when I graduated from my internship, I actually did take a part-time gig as a long-term care dietitian. And then there was also had an opportunity to get a private practice up and running. So during that time, excuse me, talk so much, I forget to breathe every now and then. Mm-hmm. It was during that time that I was trying to get a practice up and running, and I was such a new dietitian. I didn't really have the connections established at that point. And it was really hard. I think for about 6 months, I was paying on a office space that I was sharing with some other practitioners. And I was like, okay, this is essentially money that I'm flushing down the toilet every month. I got to figure something else out. So one of the partners that I was with in the office at the time, she was working at a doctor's office. And so she had the opportunity to learn about insurance through the doctor's office. And I have to give her my lovely friend, Erin Falco, who is here in New Jersey with me. She's actually New Jersey's Reimbursement Rep. Like, she's the one who probably you should have talking here, because she's even more of an expert. She's the one who really taught me so much about insurance. And she's like, it's not that bad. It's not that scary. Try it. She's like, I've done really well with it. So I figured I have nothing else to lose at this point. I'm not bringing in any clients into this, new practice I'm trying to get up and running. Let's try something different. So went through the whole process. And honestly, if it wasn't for accepting insurance, I would still be like super struggling with trying to figure out my practice situation. So that's really what turned around for me.
I think it's really interesting, your experience of kind of someone taking you under their wing, someone who kind of knew the lay of the land. I had a similar experience. Shout out to Jessica Edelglass, who I still bug routinely about questions. There is a lot of local knowledge, different insurance plans, just having someone who's been through the process before. But how do you get started as far as accepting insurance for your practice?
So there's a couple of steps. I think the first thing is, even before you start going down the path of accepting insurance, I think number one is getting a lot of the business plan things established, because those are some things that you're going to need to have in place going forward. So first thing I always say is you got to get your business plan set up and established, because for multiple reasons. Number one, when it comes to setting up insurance, you're going to want to know, am I setting up for just me, or do I have intentions of having a bigger private practice? I'm going to have other dietitians underneath me, because that actually impacts how you're going to start to get some things set up with your insurance. You definitely want to sit down with an accountant and a lawyer to review your plan. And that's also going to help to establish your entity. I see so many people who drag their feet on getting up and running because they're like, I still need to get my LLC established or figure this out, or I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Just sit down, figure it out. I find a lot of people tend to get stuck with, I'll call them like the business aesthetics of like, I got to figure out my name, I got to figure out a logo, I got to get a website and all that stuff set up. You have time to do that. You can get all that set up. Just throw a name down, your, Mandy Enright Nutrition, and move on. Because you can always change the name. You can always do what we call a DBA, doing business as, if you're going to have like a cuter, fancier name down the road. But don't get hauled up on like, what should my LLC name be, and worry about that. So definitely need to get that, because once you get your entity set up, that's going to establish your employee identification number, or an EIN number, which is what you're going to use as your identification number versus a social security code, which is what you'd be using if you were just kind of doing this on your own. And once you have that EIN number set up, then that's really kind of where everything else comes into play. So then you're going to set up what we call an NPI, or a national provider identification number.
Yeah, and that EIN, it's free to get. It takes like 5 minutes. But you can't get it unless you're a business. You can't get it as just a person. You have to have a business entity set up, which is
exactly. So that's why you need to figure out. That's why I just get the LLC established, pay the money, do whatever you do, or again, talk to the lawyer accountant and figure out what your entity is supposed to be. And again, that all ties back to your business plan. So if you have aspirations of having a big practice and having dietitians work under you, build that out from the beginning. Because I will tell you up front, I originally set myself up as a sole proprietor because I just asked around. I'm like, what should I be? That turned out to not be the right way. And when I went to backtrack to become an LLC, that was just a big pain in the booty. So take the time to figure all that stuff out front, and it will save a lot of headache.
Yeah. And even if you did just fine, like it's okay to, not do it perfect from the beginning. You might not be, you might end up creating a pain in the butt, but hey, that's kind of part of running a business.
Yeah, exactly. So the biggest things that you need to have set up to get started with insurance is you need your EIN, you need your NPI established, and then you have to have your professional liability insurance all in place as well. And then once you have all of that, then what you're going to do is you are going to go over to what they call the CAQH, which stands for the Council for Affordable Quality Healthcare website.
I didn't even know it stood for that.
What's that?
I didn't know it stood for that, but I know the website.
Yes, that is what it stands for. And that is basically like, it's like the comment application for colleges when it comes to insurance companies. So it's just really one universal application that you're going to fill out. It's a pretty extensive application. Thank God you only really ever have to do the whole thing once, but it's pretty involved. It's pretty in-depth. And then once you're done with all of that, then you can then start to move ahead with getting credentialed with insurance companies.
I think that's super important that you pointed that out, and the way that you did as a one application, like you would for college. So if you're an insurance company, you are going to, if you want to say credential, you want to make sure that the people that are going to be seeing your insured people are who they say they are, they have the right credentials. And so that centralized application is very in-depth, but many insurance companies, rather than resubmitting that information, will just go to that one centralized location.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to caveat, not every insurance company does participate in the CAQH, especially if it's a smaller local insurance company that you have. They'll have their own individual application that you're going to have to fill out. The good thing is that is more the exception than the norm. Most especially the larger companies are going to participate in the CAQH. So that's a really big time saver there. The other thing to note is that you do have to quarterly do what they call reattest. And that's basically just going through and making sure all of your information is up to date. So that's usually they're going to send you an email quarterly saying, hey, just verify your information. Every now and then something might pop up. Can you verify this? Hey, we've noticed your professional liability insurance has expired. Send us your new one. Or like, for example, I've moved offices a few times. So I've had to, on my own time go in and update all of that. So that way all the insurance companies are notified where my current location is.
Got it. So I want to make sure as the questions come in here, this is a huge topic, so I want to avoid bouncing around too much, but as we kind of pause about this credentialing step before then you would apply for each insurance company to become paneled, I think there's some question of I'm an insurance-based dietitian or I'm like a cash pay. So I think this is a question is how to structure your pricing when you might have some clients that are you might be marketing your services as cash as well. Melissa's question here. I've heard conflicting things about do you have to price your rate the same as what you would be reimbursed? How that pricing works, if you have any insight on that.
Okay, so a couple of things. So number one, I do know some dietitians that do base their cash pay rate. Typically they'll take sometimes they'll take an average on what they would get paid by the insurance companies. Or, if they have one company that primarily they tend to bill out to, that's usually what they'll set as their standard rate for insurance companies. Overall, you have to charge everyone the same amount of money. You can't charge, one person X amount, one person this amount. So you do have to keep it pretty standardized. I don't necessarily think that you have to charge exactly the same as what you would get reimbursed from an insurance company. Like if you have an insurance company that reimburses really well, and maybe your clientele maybe isn't going to pay that much, I think you kind of have to take into account how that is going to work. The other thing too, and this is something I've really been doing because I've been doing some restructuring in my own business, is most people tend to think, like you said, I'm an insurance or I am cash pay. You can build packages out that incorporate insurance benefits into them. And I think a lot of people don't think about it that way. Because think about when you're doing a package, you're offering other services outside of just that face-to-face time. So whether it's in between accountability or you have meal plans or whatever it is that extras that you're offering to those folks that are all time, that aren't necessarily just that one-on-one time with those folks that you want to be compensated for and accounted for. So those are all things that you can build into packages and then figure out how you want to discount the packages based on what people's insurance plans are, what their coverage is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I'd spoken to somebody else, talking about in between visits where it was an additional amount to have access to, messaging and email.
Yeah.
Even billing insurance. So.
Yeah. I know some dietitians that charge an initial assessment fee. So that's just, their extra time to maybe cover some of that upfront time, or even like some people I know have fancy like in-body scales or doing all these assessments that, again, you can, build an extra cost in for. Everyone kind of has their own pricing structures that they work with.
Okay. That's I hope that was helpful for Melissa. You can always add a follow-up there. So I guess there's lots of questions about everything from ICD-10 codes to claim submission. So I think maybe what we'll do is, if we get back to that whole credentialing process, I think, for me personally, I know a lot of people do it themselves and that there is the option to hire that process out. And I'm curious, I hired someone to do that, CAQH, whatever, for me. Mm-hmm. To make sure that it was done correctly. And I just wanted to spend my time on other things. So that there are credentialing companies that you can use that will kind of shepherd you through that process, as well as the application to the individual insurance company. So, but many people do it themselves, which is totally fine as well. So what happens? So now you are finished with the centralized application, or I want to call it that. What happens next as far as kind of getting started?
Okay, so you've done your CAQH. When it's your first time doing your CAQH, what you actually have to do is you have to then contact an insurance company. It really doesn't matter which one, and they are going to then give you set you up with what they call a CAQH number. So it's kind of like your CAQH identification number, and then what you then do is then you're going to go onto the individual insurance company websites, and you're going to follow the whole for providers, become a provider. And then typically what it's going to say is what's your name, what's your CAQH number, and that's your application process with them. Save screenshots or copies of all of those confirmations so you know what day that you submitted that, and kind of what the feedback was. Any emails that you get from the insurance companies saying that they've received your CAQH application, just save all of those, make special folders in your email to save all that. Because really what's going to happen is there's going to be a long lag in time. And this can take anywhere from, I've had some insurance companies turn around in 2 months. I've had others take 6 months to turn around and get that email saying, hey, yay, you're credentialed, or you might get something in your mail saying that you're now a credentialed provider with whatever healthcare company. And then you'll get a contract. Typically, they're going to ask you for a W-9 form. So you're going to fill all that out, review all that.
That's a good point. When if you're meeting with your accountant or an attorney, saying, I need a W-9 at the beginning, you might as well just have one done, ready. They can prep it for you, or you can do it yourself. But yeah,
it's online. Just Google W-9 and you will, if you're a entrepreneur or freelancer, you know the W-9 process pretty well by this point. So, I mean, really that's it. You're going to review, sign any contracts, and then you're pretty much good to go at that point.
But I think as someone who went through this process fairly recently, I think the challenge is, okay, so I have a contract, right? I'm ready to go. But then there's even then the process is very confusing, right? You have someone call you and now you've got this whole benefits checking, trying to figure out what is actually covered, diagnosis, ICD-10 codes. So how, kind of the pros and cons of that, like the time it takes, right? So talk a little bit about how you approached, a client that's perhaps has that insurance plan. How does that process work for you? Because I'm curious.
Systems are all what we want to have in place. So every time a new potential client calls me, first thing I always ask is, how did they get my information? But then I always say, okay, you came through insurance, and then we go through the whole checklist. What's your full name? So legal name, date of birth, what's your insurance provider's name, what's your member ID, and then I always ask them for the provider or the member services 800 number, whatever's on their card. You always want to make sure that you have the information for whoever is the primary holder of the
like a spouse
insurance.
or
so if it's
a
spouse or a child, like I get a lot of teenagers or college kids that will call me up. So you just want to make sure that you have their information as well on hand. Now, everybody handles their verification process a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. Some dietitians I know put all the onus onto the patients. And sometimes, honestly, that's just because they're too busy, and I completely understand that. I'm the type person, maybe because it's my anal type A personality, I like to do the calling. I like to do the verification because I want to know exactly what the information is, and I want to hear that information firsthand. You can tell the patient, okay, ask for this CPT code and ask for this diagnosis code, but honestly, they're not going to know the right questions to ask, which is why I am much more on the camp of do it yourself, or have train an intern or train a billing person that can do it for you. So what I typically do is I batch up my verification. So I'll usually have like 1 or 2 days a week where I'll call up and then go through it all. So here's how I go through my insurance verification process is call up the insurance company. It's going to take you through all these prompts. So have your EIN number. Like, I don't know if this is still popular in colleges, but like when I was in college, like your social security number went on everything. Your EIN number is going to be second nature, memorized to you, because every time you call up, they're going to ask, what's your EIN number?
Or your NPI number.
NPI, I would say I probably get asked EIN way more than NPI, but that does get asked sometimes too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're basically going to follow the prompts through for eligibility and benefits. It'll ask for the patient's date of birth. It'll ask for their member ID number. You'll go through all that. You'll get a recording. The recording is not the verification. So the next step is you sit there and you just say 100 times,
Agent.
Representative, 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 operator, representative, whatever it is you need to do to get a human being on the phone. Do not take the recording as the verification. Get a human being on the phone. That is really where like the key is. So that's why I batch all my things up, because once I get that human on the phone, then I can go through and ask as many clients as I need to at that time, rather than having to individually call every single time. As long as they're all in the same insurance provider. And then once I have that human on the phone, then that's where we can go through and I say, hey, can you let me know, is this CPT? So CPT is the procedural code. As dietitians, you only really have to know two. 97802, which is an initial assessment, 97803, which is a follow-up. If you are someone that does group sessions, there is a group session code as well. But for all argument's sake, it's usually going to be the initial and the follow-ups that you're asking about. So you're going to ask for those CPT codes. And then typically they'll come back to you and they'll tell you all about it. So they might say, this is a benefit that's 100% covered for the year, or this is 100% covered. So you always want to ask, how much is covered? Is 100%? Is there a copay? What is, how many visits do they get? And also want to verify what is considered a year, because while some might be what they call a calendar year, which is January 1st to December 31st, there are some plans out there where they could be on a fiscal year. I've had some clients that go from July 1st to June 30th. So you want to find out what's considered a year for that insurance company.
And the deductible, of course.
You want to find out if they have a deductible. Exactly. And then I will sometimes ask you about specific diagnosis codes, because you don't want to be surprised and find out, oh, hey, because I've had one insurance company lately that's like, oh, well, we only cover tube feedings, or we only cover eating disorders. So you want to just make sure that you really, really check all the boxes and verify, what's covered. And sometimes I'll even ask, like, are there any specific diagnoses that aren't covered? So you want to just verify all of that. And then the most important thing is keep a note. I keep logs of all this. What day did you call them? What time did you call them? Who did you speak with? Get a name
and the number, the reference number. Yeah.
That is gold. They do record every single conversation that you have. So if there is ever a discrepancy, you can always call back. And as long as you have that reference number for the call, they can go back and review it. So keep notes of all that information.
Oh, very good. So we've had tons of questions come in. So we're just going to have to keep you on live streaming for the next 24 hours. Maybe. Yeah. You're going to just have to stay here, parked here the rest of the afternoon.
Tethered to my desk all day.
Yes, you are. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, oh my goodness. They're all over the map. It's very difficult for me. Insurance companies hiring a biller versus billing on your own. I think this is a good time to I think people are scared personally, like you mentioned, calling each and every time you make one of those calls, it gets a little less painful. You learn a little bit more. How on earth are you going to teach a biller when you don't even understand the coverage for services? You don't even know what to ask. And I feel it's really hard to outsource something that you really don't even understand yourself. So, unless you're getting a really experienced biller who could teach you. But if the person really doesn't know anything about nutrition billing and you don't know anything, you've never done it, that seems like it would be a very interesting situation.
Exactly.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, most medical billers, I think, have a general idea of the process. So I will say from personal experience, so we have a community college nearby me, and they have a medical billing program. So I actually did take on an intern very briefly from there when I was kind of first getting started and was getting pretty busy. So I took an intern on from there, and I basically like wrote out all the steps for her and just, asked her to follow up and then fill this out. And then every time you verify with the insurance company, send this to me, or, keep files of all this stuff. And then we can connect that way. I think there can be a little bit of a learning process together. The other thing too, there's great companies out there. I'll give a shout out to Healthy Bites is an insurance credentialing company that can help you with a lot of these matters. They can do the billing for you. But I think, like I said, it all comes down to having systems in place. And when you kind of have everything just really neatly outlined, like, hey, do you have all this information for the patient? These are the prompts that you want to get through with the insurance company. These are the specific questions you want to ask at the insurance company, get all your reference numbers and information. So I think once you kind of have that process in place, then I think then it's pretty easy to teach someone else all those steps to take.
Right. You have a SOP, right? A standard operating procedure that you can
exactly. And I know people have taught interns and dietetic interns how to do it. So that way, when the dietetic interns graduate, they're like, insurance, right. No problem.
It's a really valuable skill to have. So let's say we've done our initial benefits eligibility. My practice is they call on the phone. I schedule the appointment always right then and there and say, I'm going to call the insurance. I do not wait to schedule the appointment pending insurance. I schedule them right then and there. They're ready. Yes. Get them on the books. Do you do the same?
I am exactly the same way. I always get somebody on the books first, and then I call, because what you don't want to do, and this is also goes back to why I don't have patients call and verify their own benefits, is because if they call and verify their benefits or they don't get the right information, you lost them. Right. They're done. They're not calling you back. If you are the one who's going to call and verify appointments, you have their appointment. I just like it's another touch point to that client. So I can call them up. I can say, hey, I just want to let you know you're covered for 3 visits for the year. There's a $15 copay every visit. Or I might just shoot it off in an email, just let them know. Or if it is a situation where it's not covered, then that gives me a chance to potentially sell them into something else. Hey, your visits aren't covered, but I do have, package X, Y, and Z that you might want to consider that we can work on instead.
Yeah, I think that's a good time. Sometimes people are a little apprehensive in that initial call. The paperwork, credit card information, that's another time where if someone hasn't given me their card on file, I always make sure hey, there's a copay. I'm going to resend you that. I need you to fill out that so I have it on file. Anyway, I do that in my practice. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about claims, because personally, when I first started, I was like, oh, this is easy. There's only not that many. And then you get into this, has this one been paid? Did I batch it? Did I submit it? It's like, well, I don't know, because then you're getting paid 10, 20 days later, or it needed to be resubmitted. It's out of hand. So this whole claim submission, let's talk about claims, because I could do a whole lot better myself.
Okay. Where do you want to start?
So talk about, so there's electronic claim submission, paper claim submission. Talk a little bit about, I think this whole idea of an insurance claim is really scary, right? The CMS 1500 form, at least that's kind of what I use, most insurance companies use. So talk a little bit about what does that really mean, this whole submitting the insurance claim, and what does that process look like for someone in, practice? Okay,
so at this point, I've probably submitted claims various ways at this point. When I first started my practice, I was, paper notes and everything, which I really miss. But, that's how I did them. So you can go one of two ways. One is you can go online and you can buy official CMS 1500 forms. Don't do that. I'm going to tell you up front, don't do that. The other option is you can you're going to want to set up an account on Office Ally, which is what they call a clearinghouse. So that's where you're going to set up, and that's where your insurance claims are all going to go through and get submitted. For probably the first year 9-10 months or so I was in practice, like that was how I submitted all my claims, was directly on Office Ally and filled out the 1500 form online there.
So you say it's a clearinghouse. For people who maybe aren't have heard of Office Ally, it just allows you to go to, it's kind of weird talking, one centralized place, and you can send out claims to multiple insurance companies from that one place.
Exactly. It's like a hub.
Yeah.
So it's a little hub where your insurance claims go, and then they get, sent off to wherever they need to go. Right. And then now I have upgraded to an EMR, so electronic medical record system, where they've really built in and streamlined the process for submitting claims. So,
and not all EMRs are the same when it comes to submitting claims to insurance. They might create the form for you or a file that you can easily upload to Office Ally, but to actually bill from your electronic health record, that is not all comers. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and I also want to be clear too that the EHRs will set up the form for you, but you still have to get it into Office Ally or a clearinghouse. So it's not you're not done there. I have used 2 different EMRs at this point, so they've each been a little similar and have their own nuances, but ultimately they kind of what they call batch the claims, and then you just have to upload one file onto Office Ally, which has been really nice to do. Let's see, what else is the claim process? You're my RD to RD girl. So I do have on RD to RD a financial tracker form. That actually started as my insurance claim tracking document. So for me, it was, okay, I knew what day I did the appointment. Here's the day I did the appointment. Did they have a copay that they had to pay at that time? And then, what day did I submit the insurance claim? And then that way I could track how long it took to get the claim paid back. And then I could track like when it was actually paid.
So a lot of EMRs you didn't catch that is available in Mandy's RD to RD store. So the spreadsheet tool she created for her own use, she has available in her store. So if you want to grab that.
It's since evolved into a much larger financial tracker, but it did originally start as my insurance claim tracker.
Now it's got a whole lot more bells and whistles.
Yes.
So it's interesting though. I know a lot of people that do use Office Ally. Personally, I only am in network with just 3 insurers, and a lot of insurance companies, we have their own provider portal where you can submit claims directly through their own portal. So it takes me about 2 minutes per claim, and so I just go in and I don't even use Office Ally. So it's different insurance companies do things different ways. So,
and again, everything comes back to systems too, and it's finding the system that works best for you. That's a great point that you brought up about the portals, because you do want to know what is your insurance provider's portal that they use. Some have their own. Some live on a system called NaviNet, where it's one place that you'll go, and each insurance company, you can get their information there. So that's like really where I'm going to go, and I'm going to get, check on claim status and get my EOBs that I can download and review from folks.
Yeah. And I think it's a matter of, like you mentioned, systems and figuring out where the information you need lives. And I think that's almost the biggest hurdle. It's figuring out, okay, well, it's NaviNet or Blue Cross Blue Shield has their own portal. So yeah,
and that's funny too. Every state is different. So in New Jersey, like our Blue Cross Blue Shield is on NaviNet, so that's where I only go there for it. So in my case, it's pretty rare I'm going to another, maybe 1 or 2 insurance companies. I have to go to their own portal, but for the most part, most things live on NaviNet now.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So there's a question about liability insurance, which you brought up before. When getting liability insurance, do you get a personal insurance one or one for your LLC in which you would be covered under? So I think that whole idea of professional liability insurance. It's you. It's not really your business, right?
This is a bigger question. I mean, it's primarily it's to cover myself and my work within my business. And there's a difference between there's professional liability, which is like, hey, like if I told someone to go eat baking soda because they're suffering from a lot of acidity and they get really sick from it, they can come around and, sue me, and, maybe that insurance company, maybe that professional liability covers that. But then there's also what we call like general liability, which is, for example, if you have an office space, you probably want to get general liability insurance. So if somebody slips and falls on ice outside of your office, you're covered for that situation.
Correct.
But I mean, like, your professional liability is going to cover, you and your business.
Right. Your clinical, kind of like your clinical care, I guess, if you want to call it that. But again, calling the various professional liability insurance companies, reading the policy, asking them questions, those are always good tips too. Sure. Oh goodness, HMOs versus PPOs. So maybe talking a little bit about the process between those two, as we've kind of talked in general, maybe giving some differences there.
So I'm going to be really honest. I really don't know what the difference is between HMOs and PPOs, because for the most part, I base it by the insurance company itself. And again, that's where it comes down to calling and verifying the benefits and finding out what is covered under the plan. So, people call me all the time like, oh, I have like Blue Cross Blue Shield, direct PPO access. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. All I heard was Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's all I care about. Because again, I'm going to call and verify the benefits anyway. So right. I don't.
And I really think it's important. I think that I don't think you can overstate the importance of calling and getting on the phone with a live human to verify their benefits, because plans are really, really strange. Just when you think you've got a plan figured out, it's some weird offshoot from who knows where. For example, recently I'm not in network with United, but the plan the person had was this joint venture between like Harvard Pilgrim and United. And if they're in these 3 states, they have to seek care from Harvard Pilgrim providers. But if they're in any other state, you have to do it from the United network. And then my claims didn't go to Harvard Pilgrim. The claims still had to go. Seriously. So I was in network, but the whole claims process, but by calling and talking to a live human, I was able to dig my way through that. So just knowing the insurance company, even saying it's HMO or PPO, I think sometimes it's that whether or not you need a referral from the primary care physician, which most of the time that's really not that difficult to get. I'm in Blue Cross Blue Shield. Actually, you mentioned the portal. Like some people will like fax it. I know one of the dietitian locally, she actually uses like paper faxed forms, and the other dietitian was like, well, that's crazy. I just have them send it to me directly through the portal. And I was like, how do you do that in the portal? So figuring out that I don't have to do paper faxes. If you use the portal, they can send it through the portal. So there's just a lot to learn when it comes to insurance.
And also going back to with calling and verifying for everyone, because every plan is going to be different. I mean, businesses set up their own plans. So you might, like they'll work with brokers and they'll set up certain plans. So even though, I would say about 90% of my clientele comes through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Mm-hmm. So I know most of the plans, but every now and then someone will tell me they have Blue Cross Blue Shield, but something special they set up with their company.
Through National Lumber or something.
Yeah. And they could have, all kinds of their own nuances with it.
That's a really good point.
It's really, really important
that you call every time and talk to a live human.
And I know it, like I said, it sounds really time consuming, but this is, once you get a system in place, it is a lot more streamlined.
Yeah. And you can do it. I mean, I do other things when I'm sitting on hold, whether I'm charting or doing
things. You can totally multitask.
Yeah. So it's a really good point. Mostly Medicaid. So we were talking kind of Medicare, Medicaid. So we were talking before the show kicked off that, Mandy, really, I don't take Medicare. I don't know if it's
I still take Medicare. I'm actually on the fence about opting out of it. And I probably will. So I'm somewhat familiar. I have taken some Medicare clients over my time. It's not my biggest area of expertise, but if there's a question, let's hear what it is.
Well, this was the Medicaid, which is kind of your state run. It said, I work for a community clinic and the billing department says it doesn't matter how much time I spend with the patient, the reimbursement rate is flat. I thought you can bill in 15-minute increments. So that's just a reimbursement flat. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but 97802 and 97803, which are CPT codes, professional treatment codes, they are billed in 15-minute increments unless there's something, but the amount you get paid for each increment is the same. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you're set with how much you can get per unit or 15-minute increment. But there is a max. I wouldn't necessarily say it doesn't. I don't know, that I've never heard that before where
interesting.
It's a flat rate.
So this is a good question about how much time on average does it take when you're on a call with an insurance company per client? I think that's a really good question.
So, and again, this is why I batch them up, and this is why, once I get that human, I can bang through things pretty quickly. Honestly, I would say it probably takes about anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes on a good day. And this is like, all my standard questions can get asked which is why, again, I get that one person on the phone, I can say, okay, great. Now let's talk about the next person. Let's talk about this next person. Which again is why I try not to do it individually for people, because that just gets super time consuming. But I will say on average, plan at least like 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you really don't know how long it's going to take. So just put it out there, 30 minutes, find something else to do while you're sitting on hold and waiting. And just asking the questions, and some of them require that you use some like an online. They won't let you talk to a live agent until you go through some digital rigmarole of listening to their automated stuff. So it's just part of the rules.
Yeah, honestly, that's the more time consuming part, is all the automation parts of it. And once you get through all that, then it goes along pretty quick, which is why like the more you call, prompts and all that, like you can get through that.
Right. And most of the time they're reading from a medical billing policy, and sometimes those are actually available online, and you can access them as well. So they will oftentimes list the specific ICD-10 codes for that CPT code. So sometimes asking where their medical billing policy is, or if there's a link to that, you can actually save those, which can be really helpful. I found it to be helpful personally. And someone asked about Office Ally, whether it's free or not, and that's a complicated question. So I'll let you go ahead and
sometimes. I went through this weird period for a while where it was something like, our Blue Cross Blue Shield, we're still on paper, we're transitioning from paper, so we have to charge you, like, it was something stupid, like 45 cents a claim or something like that. So once a month I would get like a bill for like something so nominal to pay out. I mean, it's not like you're not paying like a monthly access fee or anything like that. So I will say, for the most part, it is free. However, every now and then there might be a cost associated with you, of which Office Ally will certainly let you know if that is the case.
They will. But I think you mentioned processes and having something, setting up your process, and then acknowledging that, there might be some costs associated with whatever process that you choose, that anytime you start veering off and creating these onesie-twosies to steer around, a $10 cost or whatever it is that, you're creating, it takes a lot of time. So I know Office Ally, they have like what they call non-par and par insurance companies. And so depending on if 50% or more are non-participating, then they're going to charge you every month versus, so you can look and see which insurance companies, they'll say whether they're participating or non-participating. But again, are you going to try to work around that and just, it's a fee.
At the end of the day, you have to assume what are your costs of business and what's your time worth.
So, and actually, so I think that's a really good point. Okay. Do you get, so some questions about, so Office Ally is not for the most part free. Yeah. So just what I was saying, par and non-par. All right. Oh my gosh, we're running out of time. But question here about, do you get specific? So when you're verifying on eligibility, specific with like Z71.3, which is kind of that preventative code, which there's been a lot of chatter about that as of late. Do you also code for their diagnosis, diabetes, etc.? So when I'm not sure if that question, Lacey, is in specific to the billing or the verification process. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, anytime a potential patient's calling, the first, they ask is, why are you calling, or why do you want to come see a dietitian? So we'll go through that, and they might say, hey, my sugars are running high. My doctor wants me to see a dietitian, because, I don't, I'm not fully I don't have full blown diabetes. I just have a touch of diabetes. That's my favorite. I'm borderline diabetic, touch diabetes. So I want to come see someone so I don't have to go on insulin. So it's like, okay. So I'm assuming pre-diabetes at that point. At that point, I'm maybe not necessarily getting like their full-on referral codes from the doctor, but I'm getting a sense of what they have. Or if it's weight management related, particularly weight management, I always ask them, how tall are you? What would you estimate your weight to be? So then I'll kind of have a sense of what their BMI code is, so I can assess, like, are they overweight or are they obese? And then best website in the world, icd10data.com. You can go on and you can look up, let's say someone says they have pre-diabetes. So I'll go on, pull up the pre-diabetes code. I want to be very clear. I'm not diagnosing this person. All I want to do is get a code just to give the insurance company to get a sense of what's going to be covered. But I'm going to get the official ICD-10 codes from their doctors. This is just to move the process along a little bit more, to find out, is pre-diabetes covered or just diabetes covered, to get that information, just so I can, again, move the process. Now, when it comes to submitting the claim, that's where you definitely want to have something like, if someone's coming to see you for like real true MNT, if they're coming to see you for diabetes, cholesterol, whatever it is, you definitely want to have something from the doctor that confirms what is their specific diagnosis. As dietitians, we cannot diagnose people, with the exception of BMI. We are allowed to diagnose BMI. With that said, do I put on people's forms an obesity code? Yes. But otherwise, that's not really in our scope of practice to
diagnose diabetes.
To diagnose diabetes, or, specifically where they're at.
Right. And most physician offices, I would say, getting a referral, that's something they do pretty often. So
yeah. Also, too, getting into, we'll talk about coding a little bit. This actually came up on another Facebook group I was in this morning. It actually does matter the order that you code things on your claim form. So you want to code, two things. You want to code in specifically their primary reason why they're coming to see you. So if they're coming to see you for diabetes and they happen to be overweight or obese, your first code should be a diabetes code. If they're coming to see, and you want to put the diabetes code first, and then you'll code the other reasons why they're there to see you. The other thing too, especially, and this is why that ICD10data.com website is really important, is you'll notice that codes have letters and periods, and then a whole bunch of numbers after that. Every code kind of drills down to very, very specific. So you can't just put a very top level obesity code. I think it's like E60, is it E66?
Something like that, 63.3 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, so you can't just put like E66 as a code for obesity. You have to put like E66.3, which is overweight.
Or unspecified or something.
Right. So primarily what I do, so if someone's coming to see me for weight management and they happen to have, they're obese or overweight, I'll put the obese or overweight code first, then I'll put their BMI code, and then I put the Z71.3. If someone's coming to see me, they're perfectly healthy, they just want to learn healthy eating, they're not overweight, they're not underweight, they are right in the normal, BMI range, I only use Z71.3. I'll put that in.
Does it matter if they have preventative care benefits? Do you have to put Z71.3 first in order for it to be paid as like no copay and all that good stuff?
It can, yeah. So I usually will, I play around with it every now and then, but again, primarily I'll put like, what is the main reason they're coming to see me. You also, and again, this comes back to the verification. You want to find out specifically what they'll cover or not cover. Because I've had some plans that say they'll cover preventative care.
Yep.
They won't cover obesity.
Yep.
So in that case, I don't put an obesity code on their claim form. I just put a Z71.3. I don't put a BMI, don't put an obesity code, Z71.3, and move on.
Yep. Had the same. So I think this is that how and why to accept insurance. We talked about, I know we're kind of running out of time, that it can feel like this is complicated. It can kind of feel really, really overwhelming because there's a lot of moving parts, right? But that, some of those processes, and I think that's what you said and why it's really valuable that you establish a process for, when a client calls. I wish I had it mapped out, but I took my toddler's easel paper, okay, and I put it up on the wall and I mapped out like what's going to happen. Okay, the client's going to call, and then what information am I going to get? Am I going to send them this form on what day?
Yeah.
So that I mapped the entire process out. What email am I going to follow up with an email? And then once you have your process, you can get quicker at it. But if you don't have a process, you never really get fast, or then you're scrambling, you're losing things, a claim didn't get done. So establishing that process, being process driven. And it takes time to set up a process, but it's time well spent, because then you can get quicker. And then when you find a new tool or a new resource, you can look at your process and you can say, wow, if I implemented that there, it would really help my efficiency. But if you don't have it mapped out, or you don't have a good sense of what it is, then it's hard to do.
Yeah, totally. Processes are key.
Processes are key. So before we sign off, there's a ton of good comments, people looking by Healthy Bites, that you have a Dietitian Reimbursement Toolkit. Where? Tell people what is in that toolkit and what they find if they buy your Dietitian Reimbursement Toolkit.
I consider this the Dietitian's Reimbursement Bible these days. So basically, I have taken things from over the years. I've actually given presentations about reimbursement. So on this toolkit, you will find it's about an hour-long webinar presentation that goes through the whole process from the upfront. Why do you even bother accepting insurance? What are the pros and cons? What are the common myths? And then we go into the steps of, where do I get started? The whole CAQH process. What happens once you finally get credentialed, into the claims process. I even have tutorial videos on how to fill out a claim form on there, both online, old school, if you're filling out the paper form. I think I have a paper form on there. I have a lot of resources, templates. I have like a whole form that's like literally like your talking point checklist when you're going through and getting information, starting with the client, as well as then going into when you're calling the insurance company. So all those questions you want to be asking, do you cover the CPT code and diagnosis codes and deductibles and copays, and getting that reference information. I have some forms about cancellation policies, resources, references. It's pretty in depth. I have some stuff in there about ethical considerations. Just so you know, if you're taking someone through insurance, you're not supposed to be meeting them in a coffee shop and talking about, all their important information. But yeah, it's a pretty in-depth toolkit, but it's, taking all this information that I've been asked over, questions I've been asked over the years, and resources that I've put together and things that I've found to be very valuable, and kind of really want to make it a one-stop shop for people. I've also given some good resources for where else you can go to get other information or other questions that you can ask. So definitely check it out. It's every time a question comes up on any Facebook group, I'm like, just look at it's in my kit. I promise it's in there.
Yeah, I think just acknowledging, as people are thinking about accepting insurance, that you don't go from 0 to 100 miles an hour overnight, right? You're going to get a call, a couple of clients will be this insurance company, and while it is overwhelming, I think, to start making those calls, and the people who take your call, like, this is what they do all day long, and you're like, I'm not asking the right question, and it feels kind of painful. I don't want to say, because it's only been a couple of years for me, but that over time, you get quicker at it, and it doesn't feel so awkward.
Yeah.
So
But I mean,
it's not gonna be like 5,000 people calling you and you'll have time to
No, but I mean, here's the thing. Insurance is free marketing for your business. I mean, I've run a very part-time private practice that I've been able to come in and out of in my time as a dietitian. So, whether I was doing back when I was trying to do more full-time private practice, and then I went down to like 1 day a week where I really wasn't spending my time out there and promoting my private practice. So, most of my people, again, were coming through insurance, and I took a little break from any client work for a while, and now I've started to pick some clients up. So it's been nice to have that consistency of a way to get myself out there without necessarily, spending my time advertising a part of my business that I don't really, it's not a big part of my business, and not where I want to put most of my focus on.
Right. And I actually feel like it's a really important point. I know we're just at time here that, you hear a lot of people say, well, cash pay, you're going to get clients that are motivated to work with you. I think about my own self. If my physician didn't take my insurance, I would go to a different physician. If they didn't, my pediatrician, that I'm a highly doting mom who cares about my children, but that I want to get my medical care from someone where I don't have to pay out of pocket. And I think this labeling of, if people are seeing you through insurance, they're not going to be motivated. I just think of yourself. Do you see medical providers that accept insurance? Do you expect them to? Are you someone who would do the work? I think this labeling, it's not wrong or right. You can run your practice how you want. But that these are some of the realities of accepting insurance. You do have to go through this process. So it's not really about, is the client going to be motivated or not? You can do that on the call. And if it doesn't feel good, you don't have to accept everybody who calls you.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic point. You brought so much good stuff up. And again, this is like all stuff that I do cover in that webinar in the toolkit. Really briefly, I'll go through my pros to accepting insurance, which is that number one, as dietitians, it helps to really establish us as qualified healthcare providers, not just some nitwit at a health food store. I said this for advertising. Clients want to utilize their insurance benefits. They're paying for it in some way. So they really want to use their benefits first before they have to pay out of pocket. It can at least guarantee a few repeat visits depending on what their coverage is. Doctors prefer to refer to providers who participate in a network. When I first got started, I wasn't accepting insurance. My doctor's like, let us know if you think about it. Then we'll start sending some people your way. And it can create some new opportunities. Now on the cons, there's definitely, we're not trained in insurance. There's a learning curve involved with it. There's a time lag to get this whole process started. Yes, there are some services not covered, but I will say it has gotten so much better. There's a lot more that is covered. The client commitment and retention. Now, I will say, and this is, again, getting back to my point I talked about earlier about how can you build packages around the insurance benefits? Because, again, that having that skin in that game in some way is going to help to increase retention in some way. Because, again, if someone's just coming to see you for insurance, I've had people blow through their insurance benefits, didn't care, and that was just a waste of all of our time. But if there's a way that you can build in and say, hey, okay, yeah, I accept insurance, but hey, if you want extra accountability, you can pay X amount a month or however you want to work it out, then I think that can help to increase
meal plans or other
all those other things.
Supplements.
Exactly. And it, just like you said too, you can say no. I think I've heard that rumor too, where people think just because I accept insurance, I have to accept everybody. You do not. If, I don't really deal with people, I don't deal with oncology or a lot of intense gut health or allergies. I know that's not my area of expertise, and I know that's not where I'm going to be the best for people. And I know that there's other people who are significantly better at those areas, and I'd rather refer that business out and be able to focus on my clientele that I know I can best support. So yes, you can say no to people if you don't feel good, if someone sounds like a crazy pants on the phone, if someone has some condition that you don't feel that you're the right fit for. So eating disorder, a big thing I get a lot of time is eating disorder. So a lot of our eating disorder specialists in the area actually don't take insurance. And I have people call me all the time from getting discharged from these really intense inpatient programs. And they're like, well, you participate in her insurance company. Can they come see you? And I have to be very honest. I say, you know what? I am not the best person. Yes, just because I participate in insurance doesn't mean I'm going to be able to give them the best quality of care. And I am doing both of us a disservice if I take this case on, because I'm not the best expert in this area. I want them to be with someone who is an expert in this area. And unfortunately, if that means that they're going to have to pay, money out of it, then, that's kind of how it has to be. But I need to think about the patient's care first. I mean, that's my ethics right there.
So really good stuff. I feel like it's a huge topic, talking about reimbursement for nutrition services, but I think you made some great points there about the pros and cons of being able to have our services covered by insurance. Shows that we are part of the medical team, that we offer value. And so
Yeah. And also, just to debunk probably one of the biggest myths, I've done very well with insurance reimbursement. So when people are like, oh, the pay is not that well, I wouldn't say that's a true statement. Now, I will say over the years, I have learned which companies don't pay well, and I have dumped them because it's not worth my time. And that's where talking to other practitioners in your area is really important, to find out what are the companies that are worth participating with.
You don't have to be told the reimbursed rate, but they can say who pays promptly, who, like in general, who pays well and who doesn't pay as well. I don't think that's,
No, you don't have to talk about specific numbers, because and everyone does get paid a little differently too. I mean, it also does depend on, how many years you've been with the how many years you've been credentialed with them, and how many patients come through to you. So there are a lot of nuances, but overall, like you said, you're going to, there's people who be like, oh yeah, you want to participate in them, they pay the best. You don't want to participate in them, they don't pay well, or they don't cover any of my services. So it became a waste of time to keep calling to verify benefits. Also, no nuances for companies. Like, for example, in New Jersey, Aetna will only cover 1 hour max per visit. So if you're somebody who does a 90-minute initial assessment and someone's coming through as an Aetna patient, I automatically have to split their first visit into 2 visits. Or, I have them come back sooner than I probably would have somebody else come through. So make sure you know that. Most insurance companies, you can see them for a max of 2 hours. But knowing, there are some companies that might only pay you for a max of
75 minutes.
1 or 75 minutes. Yeah. So knowing all of those.
Yeah. And I think those are in those reimbursement guidelines, or finding someone locally who is an expert.
Sometimes they are, but again, talking to people will get you the information so much faster.
Oh yeah, so much faster. Well, this has been really enlightening for me. We have a ton of questions. I'll try to loop back around and
yes. And I will give a plug to my toolkit, because again, I'm pretty sure most questions that you guys have are probably in that toolkit somewhere, but
yes,
it's a beast. This is a beast of a topic. I know.
Yes. And I did put a special 15% off discount code for your reimbursement toolkit through Friday.
Kids,
so
lucky kids.
Spring 15, it's on the Facebook page, but I'll link to that. I'll put it in the comments, where only till Friday you can save 15% off just Mandy's toolkit. So definitely snag that. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining today's live show. Mandy, thank you so much. I had a great time asking you questions, and there's about 9 million more I would have liked to ask. So clearly this is a topic I should just add regularly to.
This is like a monthly event.
Yeah, I actually, a topic people had asked me to come on and talk about was out-of-network billing, which I'd really love to find somebody to come on and talk about out-of-network billing.
Yeah, that is not my area of expertise. I've been pretty lucky to have get things covered there.
Yeah, so people, if you aren't credentialed with anyone, as long as the client has out-of-network benefits, you can bill their insurance company. It's a little bit dicey. I've done it, but it's interesting. So everyone, thank you so much. We're gonna we'll sign off for today, and definitely check out Mandy's Dietitian Reimbursement Toolkit, and we will see you back. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be May. That's crazy to think about. Well, May is going to be kind of dedicated to the topic of sports nutrition. We have a couple of people coming on to talk about working with student athletes. Riley B, sports RD, is going to come on. She works with a college sports program as a dietitian. She kind of built that from the ground up, so it'll be really fun to talk about that as well. So I will see you all back here in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.